Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Citizens of the world, welcome to another edition of the Live from the Heartland show. We're up here in Chicago, the greatest city in the world, in the 49th Ward. And today I will be joined by Euan Hague, a neighbor, a friend who will be co-hosting with me today. And a little bit later, we're going to bring on the one and only James W. Russell, an old STS pal of mine who does a lot of writing, and we'll get into that. And we're going to have Sophie Lucido Johnson, a resident of Rogers Park here in Chicago, who is also an author and a cartoonist doing cartoons for the likes of the New Yorker. So we're going to bring you some happy stuff as well as some critical and not so happy stuff. It's pretty cold here in Chicago, a little warmer than it was, but it's going to get below zero. Things in the world are a little bit in turmoil. We have a situation where we just have invaded Venezuela, and now we're going after Greenland. There's a lot of trials and tribulations that we have to endure, but hopefully this show will keep your spirits up a little bit because we have a lot of work to do for a number of years to come. With that said, good morning to you, Euan.
Good morning, Michael.
How are you doing up there on the north end of the ward?
Keeping warm.
That's
As you said, it's pretty cold out here in Rogers Park today.
Well, without any further ado, as I've heard some people say, let's bring on Jim Russell, James W. Russell, author, professor, XTS activist, a wonderful guy, and it's glad to have him back on the show. It's been almost 2 years to the day. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Mike. Happy to be here.
Good to have you again. Well, why don't you tell us one of the reasons that I asked you to come on is because you had written on an STS email list, that's Students for Democratic Society for all you young ones, about our friend Robert Pardun, who was an organizer, activist, author, came out of University of Texas SDS. I always looked up to him, part of the kind of prairie power mixing politics and culture. You were close to that too. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Robert Pardun?
Well, I first met Robert Pardun when SDS sponsored a conference of miners in Hazard, Kentucky. And I had hitchhiked there from Oklahoma, where I had been involved in organizing a chapter of SDS. And that's when I met the contingent from Texas, which included Robert. And we then, they offered me a ride back from that conference all the way to northern Texas, which sure beat hitchhiking back. So I piled into a car with a whole bunch of people, and we talked all the way, riding through the Deep South. One of the people in the car was Black, so it was a mixed group, and you can imagine in those days what that was like. Anyway, Robert was about to get a job as an SDS campus traveler. That meant he went from campus to campus, either places where there were chapters already to kind of tie things together. Remember, this is all pre-internet, and telephone calls are very expensive, so there was a lot of face-to-face contact in those days. And that's was kind of Robert's job. And then he would try to organize chapters along the way. So he showed up in Norman, Oklahoma, where I was, and we spent a few days together. And he had such a contagious personality, which was one of the reasons why a number of people said he was one of the best organizers that SDS ever had. He was a really nice guy. He was very unassuming. You felt like you were his best friend. in a way. And I'm sure he had a lot of people who felt that way. So he did that for a long time. Then he moved up to the SDS national office, which was in Chicago, and at various times worked out of that office in terms of national leadership. Now, the tragedy of Robert's life is that he inherited Parkinson's disease from his mother. And, I think it probably came on when he was in his 50s or 60s.
Yeah.
And then I kept in touch with him off and on over the decades after the 1960s. And then he had adult children in Portland, Oregon, which is where I'm.
Let me jump in here. You mentioned that conference in Hazard, Kentucky. Was that in '64?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yep. I remember getting a notice about that. I had been involved in sort of the takeover of the college newspaper at Lake Forest College, and we got the college press service. And there was a story about these unemployed miners, the Northern Student Movement, Students for Democratic Society, and SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, meeting in Hazard. And that just fanned the flame, so to speak, of my love for the notion of the interracial movement of the poor and just people, all different kind of people getting together. And probably one of my favorite memories of Pardun is when I traded him a deer skin that I had gotten at a trading post at Canyon de Chelly for a cowboy shirt that he had with nice snaps on it. He was a wonderful guy, and I'm glad that you wrote an obit about him in the SDS newsletter. And I just wanted to share a little bit with the masses who are listening to or viewing our show about this wonderful guy who has passed. There's a lot of us who are going out. We're moving along. So you have a number of books out, and I want to get to that. But first, I want to get your comments, because I know you're paying a little bit of attention to what's going on with the U.S. government and Venezuela.
Yeah. I mean, to say something that, maybe people haven't heard so much is the way that it's covered in the United States right now is you would get a sense that the Chavista movement has totally collapsed, and that that Trump has basically been able to take over the oil supply, and that the acting president of the country, Delcy Rodriguez, has pretty much abandoned any of the types of things that the movement in Venezuela wanted. Okay, well, I think that that's a very distorted view of it. If you look at the scene on the ground in Caracas and other cities in Venezuela, all kinds of people turned out in the hundreds of thousands to support that government after the abduction of the president Maduro, which is just such an outrageous thing to have happened. And so that what is I think a better interpretation of what's going on is that the leadership of the PSUV, which is the Socialist Party of Venezuela, the leadership of that has had to retreat, and it's a strategic retreat, which is very different than abandoning, what the project is, and so, they're negotiating, and Delcy Rodriguez is a very, very capable person. She went to the Sorbonne, she went to Oxford, she speaks several languages. She's been with the Chavistas since the beginning of that, was close to the leadership, and then worked her way into that leadership, and was very, very close to Hugo Chavez. So what's going on is a very strategic, what I think anyway. I don't have any special, contact with that, but what my interpretation from a distance and having followed it for a number of years is that the leadership is strategically trying to maneuver around this incredible attack and bombardment. It's the first time that a South American country has ever been bombarded like that, from the air, and over 100 people were killed, and it's just a horrible thing that happened.
Euan, you had a question for Jim.
Yeah, Jim, Mike's told me a lot about you, and I'm kind of interested in those connections between the civil rights movement and SDS and activism in the 1960s. And I noticed that you mentioned 1964. You were involved in also some sit-ins in Oklahoma. And I was just wondering if you could reflect on that, and in Martin Luther King week, how the civil rights gains are being rolled back in the United States at the moment.
Yeah, well, I was involved in a part of this civil rights movement that was really not at the center of it. It was in Oklahoma. Oklahoma is a border South state, and it was in Tulsa. Okay, now Tulsa, since 1964, there's been a lot of national news about the 1921 massacre in Tulsa. Okay, when I grew up in Tulsa, that was never mentioned. Okay,
that was a massacre of a black community that was like the Black Wall Street.
Right. Yeah, it was Greenwood, North Tulsa. Okay, a very vibrant community. Okay, and then there was an incident that got blown totally out of proportion, and then a bunch of whites attacked Greenwood. Okay, and the death toll remains unknown, but at least 300 people were killed in that. And some people call it the largest race massacre in American history. Okay, well, in 1964, there were sit-ins. Okay, and you have to remember that between 1921 and 1964 is only 40 years. Okay, it's 43 years. So there were a lot of people alive in 1964 who had lived through that. And it was especially true in the Black community, which had been historically traumatized by that. So the Black community was somewhat conservative, and was not everybody was in favor of the sit-ins that occurred. I'm just sort of painting the context of that, and so sit-ins were held. And I make the argument that the first sit-ins in the modern history of the civil rights movement occurred in Oklahoma, okay, in Oklahoma City. In 1958, Clara Luper, a leader of the NAACP in Oklahoma City, led lunch counter sit-ins. Okay, that was well before the ones in North Carolina, which a lot of people put as the beginning of the sit-in movement. But this happened in Oklahoma City. And then in 1964, she came up from Oklahoma City, encouraged people to sit in, brought a bunch of young people with her, joined the first sit-ins. Okay, and I submit that they were the last sit-ins in the movement, because soon after that, the 1964 Civil Rights Act was passed, which integrated. Now, I'm being a little bit kind of bragging about Oklahoma here, and it's sort of claim to fame that hardly anybody recognizes or knows, but I think it's a detail that's an interesting one. Yeah, so I took part in that, and then took part in another school integration after that.
But, I ended up being a restaurateur at the Heartland Cafe where the show originated. And long before I opened the Heartland, I used to talk, when I was young, I'd talk about having a truck stop in Oklahoma. Why? I don't know. I thought Oklahoma was cool. I don't like it as much these days, the current government. But it is home of a lot of socialists back in the day. And, there was the Green Corn Rebellion in Oklahoma, where black, white, Indian, Mexican farmers didn't want to go serve in the First World War. Let's move to your books a little bit. And I do want you to talk about, one of your books talks about, or one of the topics you've suggested is Medicare versus Medicare Advantage, which I do have Medicare Advantage. I keep thinking I just want to go back to regular Medicare. Fill us in on that. But before that, I'm just going to say, because we're not going to have time to talk about it, people should know that you wrote a great novel. You have about 11 books out, pretty serious stuff. But you wrote a novel called Escape from Texas, a novel of slavery and the Texas War of Independence. I just want to recommend it to everyone. It really gripped me and was a very powerful book. But tell us a little bit about Medicare versus Medicare Advantage, because you have become an expert on retirement.
Okay. Medicare, of course, is a big part of retirement. Okay, because until the 1960s, if you retired, you probably didn't have any health insurance at all. Okay, and then Medicare, passed under Johnson. Okay, and so now we have this program, which is it makes it in a very interesting way that when you look at the statistics, okay, that comparing the United States and Europe, okay, of course, Europeans all have health care. It's universal. Okay, and then their health outcomes are a lot better. But there's one group in the United States that's actually competitive with Europe, and that is people who are over 65 because they have Medicare. Okay, and so if you compare apples to apples here, people over 65 in Europe and people over 65 in the United States. The United States doesn't look so bad, okay, because we have this great government-sponsored program. Okay. Well, of course, we have people who want to privatize that program, and the name of that privatization is Medicare Advantage, where the government pays private insurance companies to administer the program. Okay, now, a lot of people might think, well, so who cares, who administers it, the federal government or a private insurance company, and aren't private insurance companies very efficient? Well, there are two very big reasons why you should care. Okay, the first reason is that if you have traditional Medicare, that's the government program, you can see up to 98% of all doctors and hospitals in the country take traditional Medicare. Okay, and so you essentially have universal coverage wherever you go. Okay, you live in Chicago, you happen to go to that truck stop in Oklahoma, you run into a problem, okay, you just go to the nearest facility and they'll take Medicare. That's not true of Medicare Advantage. Medicare Advantage has networks, okay, and you have to see somebody in one of those networks. Now, this can be a problem, and I'll tell you the problem. Okay, try not to bring you down a little bit, but I have cancer. Okay, so I have a rare form of cancer, and I need to see certain specialists. I can't just see any oncologist. Okay, there have to be people who have real experience with what I have. And when I found out who that specialist was in Portland. And when I went to her, she said she was sorry, but she didn't take my insurance because I had Medicare Advantage at the time. Okay, so I was in a real jam, okay, with a very serious illness. And that can happen to anyone. Okay, that is, your Medicare Advantage plan may work fine until you suddenly run into a very unusual problem. Okay, and then you find out that you can't go to the person that you need to go to. So that's, yeah, go ahead, Michael.
I have a setup where I can really see any doctor. And I guess my real question, though, is can one switch from, and would it be advisable, from Medicare Advantage back to Medicare?
Okay, well, first I'm going to challenge whether you really can see any doctor, because my plan supposedly had that feature. Okay, but it turns out that you can see any doctor as long as that doctor is willing to see you. And they, with Medicare Advantage plans, the doctors and the hospitals are free to stop, to not take it. You know, for example, I have my plan actually through the state of Connecticut because I used to work there. Okay, and just recently, the Mayo Clinic stopped taking the plan that the state of Connecticut has. Okay, and it's a Medicare Advantage plan. So people who needed to go there, okay, were suddenly in the same type of jam I was in Portland. Now, it's a kind of long story because I'm involved in a movement actually from Oregon in terms of Connecticut of, you know, it's a union struggle to get it so that we can choose between Medicare and that Medicare Advantage. Now, you asked the question about can you switch back to Medicare? The answer is yes, but here's the problem. Okay, if you have a serious illness, okay, you know, you can switch back to Medicare. That part is fine, but Medicare only pays 80%, and so most people need a supplemental plan, a Medigap plan. Okay, and those are administered by private companies. The private companies can use pre-existing conditions to jack up your price. You know, so were I to go on the market for a Medigap plan having cancer, okay, I would be paying, you know, probably $4,000 or $5,000 a month for a plan, you know, which I would not be able to afford. That was one of the things that when Obamacare was passed, that they never got around to dealing with it, okay, is that Obamacare, you know, kind of dealt with the problem of pre-existing conditions in terms of the exchanges, okay, but it didn't deal with this type of issue in terms of Medicare Advantage. And
we're going to run short of time, so why don't you ask a question? You're ready.
Yeah, we got a couple of minutes left, James, and you talk about some of these things, I guess, in your new book, the medical memoir about recovering from illness. I was just wondering, you know, our next guest is going to talk about the importance of community and community support, and so I'm just wondering what is your lesson that you take away from your writing on your medical situation and illness?
Yeah, I mean, I went through, cancer. I had a lung removed. I ended up having open heart surgery, almost got killed in the process. And I've recovered really well from it. Okay. And so that book is not a particularly political book. It's just about it's a memoir about my experience going through it. I would say the one big lesson is that if you're in a situation like that, you try to get the best conventional care you can get. That's absolutely essential. But you don't leave it at that. Okay? There's also a lot of things that you can do on your own, like exercise, diet, good sleep. All of these things can help in terms of recovery. So this book is a lot about what I did that enabled me to, get through something that almost killed me and, was very, very debilitating in terms of the recovery.
Well, we're really glad to have you on today, and you are one of our medical advisors these days. We did recently have Ellen Mason and Mary Driscoll on, who are two longtime activists, et cetera, and in the medical world. And they were talking about the medical situation in the country. So between them and you, we got a lot of good advisors. And I do appreciate your stories from Oklahoma. Okay, Jim. Really glad to have you. I know you've been working hard this morning. You had to drive someone to an appointment. We're glad you joined us. We'll be right back with more Live from the Heartland here on the left end of your dial or however you're getting this show.
Though the road be dark and dreary, the pathway burning and dry, dim light barely leading us on, girl, we can make it if we try. Though winds may rage and storms may blow, discouragement at each dead end, no guiding light to lead us forward, no helping hand from a friend. We can make it, pretty baby, we can make it if we try. We can make it, sweet darling, we can make it if we try. If you love me like you say you do, you've got to take a better hold. Cause it takes lots of determination, girl, from your heart, mind and soul. And don't let nobody steer our course, cause I know this one will always try.
Hey, you citizens of the world. Welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of January 23rd. I'm Michael James, and today my co-host is Euan Hague, and he is bringing on his neighbor, and she would be a neighbor of mine too by a few more blocks, the one and only Sophie Lucido Johnson. So Euan, take it away.
Yep, Sophie is a cartoonist and author, resident of Rogers Park. Has got a new book out called Kin, The Future Family. Sophie, your book is all about how people build relationship networks. Can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write this and what you learned from writing it?
Yeah. Well, a lot. I mean, it's fun to be on this podcast. Thanks for having me, because a lot of the inspiration is really Rogers Park, centric. Rogers Park is such a community-driven neighborhood in Chicago, and we moved next door to Euan almost 10 years ago now, which is wild but true, and found everything we were looking for on this street with people who sort of wanted to be in relationship with us. And then we also lived with another couple during the pandemic, and living with another couple in a house as adults who we all kind of got pregnant at the same time while cohabitating was really fun. And it made me feel like there's a lot of things that I'm learning here that people in my generation, I'm in a millennial and in Gen Z, are not doing in terms of being face to face with other people and giving help, accepting help, and just being able to work in small, close-knit groups. It's on the outs. We're not doing that as much. So I wanted to research that and learn a little bit more about it. So that was the origin of this particular book.
And you talk a lot about redefining family in a way of having networks of friendships and doing things like sharing meals, overcooking and sharing meals with friends and neighbors.
Yeah. It's there's sort of a fewer people who are living close to their families of origin now than ever before in human history. And that has created sort of a fragmented support network for people. You're living kind of by yourself or with one other person, and that's not enough people to manage all of the needs of human life. So the question then becomes, well, if we aren't going to be anytime soon moving closer to our parents or grandparents, also if we're having kids much later in life and our parents are less able to support us, or our grandparents less able to support us, then how can we use what we have to create systems of help? So then that becomes sort of the redefining of family through having lots of very close friends who are around you when you're really messy. I think a lot of it has to do with being around people when they're not their best and staying.
I want to go back to the Rogers Park stuff. You did give a nice shout out to Rogers Park, but I'm curious to know why you chose Rogers Park. What was it you liked about it, and has it met your expectations?
Rogers Park is the best neighborhood in the world. And that's
we're in sync on that, I'll tell you.
Yeah, I feel really clear about it too. My husband and I met in New Orleans, Louisiana, and that's a really cool city too. One of the things that's great about the South is there's very strong porch culture because the weather allows for it. And so you're really getting to know people in your neighborhood. I came here for grad school to Chicago. We moved into an apartment in Lakeview, and we just were kind of shell shocked by how we didn't know anyone. We lived in a building with people, and nobody seemed to want to, people were irritated that we wanted to get to know them. And we did make friends with our next door neighbors who were much older than us and also politically different from us. But that was a great experience. But I was coming up north from Lakeview a good amount. And every time I would be in Rogers Park, I just got this vibe like, oh, this is different. This is a place where I think people are saying hi to each other. And there's just more of the first time Luke and I came up here actually was my teacher at the Art Institute, Peggy McNamara, she's the artist at the Field Museum, the resident artist there. She was teaching me scientific illustration. She invited us to her sister's house on Ridge Avenue. It's that big house on Ridge in Greenview that if you saw it, you'd be like, oh yeah, that huge house. It's a very historic house. Yeah, in the neighborhood. And she invited us to that house for Easter. So we went to that house. We biked up from Lakeview, and everyone was barefoot, and there were like 100 people, over 100 people, and they hid 1,800 eggs in the backyard, and there were all these kids, and just the sort of man who owned the house is Mike Tobin. He's pouring champagne. He doesn't even know who we are. Oh, we're so glad you're here. There's just this ebullient, joyful, welcoming. There's music, like people playing instruments. And I was like I want to live here. I want to live in Chicago, but I want to live in this neighborhood where people are this amount of welcoming. So now we live, not too far from that house.
You cover a lot of this in your book, Kin, The Future of Family. If we go back to New Orleans, you talked a little bit about going there right after Katrina to feel the need to rebuild as a young just after graduation, but also in retrospect, you feel that that was somewhat a naive decision? And you talk a little bit about that in the book. I was wondering if you could, I mean, with the politics of the rebuilding of New Orleans has obviously been something in the last 20 years, which has attracted a lot of attention. But I just wondered, sort of looking back now, obviously you met your husband and that was, you know, you've got some wonderful connections there, but that kind of role that your generation wanting to do good in the world, to quote Mike, maybe in retrospect did not have the impact you'd hoped.
I mean, that was 2007, 2008 era. So Katrina was 2005. So it was like the city was rapidly rebuilding, and I'm from the West Coast, so I really didn't know anything about anything, and I was a child, and we kind of got this message that I was recruited by Teach for America, and that was a moment where Teach for America was really prestigious because of the economic crisis, that the recession. So there were very few jobs for people coming right out of college. And this felt like, oh, I could go be a teacher and also do something helpful and sort of get a career kick started. And, you know, oh, there's this sense that people need us, like our Americans need us in New Orleans. But what was really happening, of course, we know now, is the mass firing of over 2,000 Black educators who were from New Orleans being replaced by sort of lawless charter school system. The entire city was charterized. There's no public schools. By the third year I was there, they were all gone, and just replacing all of these veteran educators whose union was decimated by the storm with young white transplants who were eager to be quote unquote helpful, but really it allowed the furthering of the economic agenda of people who had sort of a theory about, this is shock doctrine economics. This is this like idea that if something really truly devastating happens to a community, people are so off their guard that radical change can happen, but not in such, but at the expense of history or at the expense of what is wanted by the people who live in that community. And I unwittingly sort of became a pawn in that. Let
me jump in with that. Yeah. Who was messing with the schools? Was it Vallis? Wasn't he running the schools down there at that time?
Yes. Yes. And it was also not one individual. It's Chicago School of economists who went in there and were sort of like, let's do this. Let's knock this to the ground. And they were very successful at knocking it to the ground, not successful at reforming the schools to make them better for children or their families. And really what they did was perfect the school to prison pipeline, which really in Louisiana is totally, and I mean, this is going off the rails a bit, but it certainly was eye-opening, and that's all really negative. But what I could say that was positive was within 2 years, to me, it was clear that this was not good, what we were doing, but also that leaving would unceremoniously would also not be like the right move. So that's where I got really into organizing and talking to people who were from New Orleans about, well, what can we do now that we're here, and rebuilding the unions over there, and trying to educate people on what happened post Katrina. And that was really great. We started a group called the New Teachers Roundtable, where for transplant educators who were learning how to be more mindful of the communities we were in. And I ended up staying there about 10 years and learned a lot and did a lot of really hard work. And yes, I did. I met my husband. He was also sort of doing education, nonprofit work, heart's in the right place, but to what end? And also, I will add that my students died, like most of the students, especially in the first 2 years that I taught there, either went to prison or died from gun violence usually. And so we weren't helping It wasn't getting better.
Now, to turn to lighter matters. I mean, this is a country that we're dealing with. I'm thinking of some of your. What made you want to write graphic memoirs?
So Kin is not super graphic. I pitched a book. This is actually my fourth book. So I pitched one. My second one was fully audio, so it doesn't always like log. But I pitched a book that had 100 images, and the editor said you can have 10. So this book has 10. I like still have the pitch that has all these images that just have big X's through them. I taught special education in New Orleans, often in severe, profound communities, but mostly just learned that not everybody learns with language, and that made me pivot to visual, ways of learning. So I started to draw, and also I like art as modality for humor. I think humor is really important. So I was doing stand-up in New Orleans, and I kind of was able to parlay some of that into cartoons. And I don't know, I like that. I like language and art working in concert to become tools for conversation, change, and education. So I like them both.
So as well as illustrating your own books, and I know you've done cartoons for the New Yorker. What is a Sophie Lucido Johnson cartoon? Is it we're on audio medium, right? So you have to.
No, we're on both audio and visual.
Okay.
Elements. What are the elements?
So I have my like every year I buy the calendar, the page a day, and they don't tell us. The New Yorker doesn't tell us if you're in the page a day, so you get it, and then you flip through to see. So all of these pages you see behind me are about a dozen that just popped up in the page a day. Here's one of them. This is one that I wrote. It's a woman, and she has her baby strapped to her front on her little baby wearing, and she's on the red carpet, and the person on the red carpet is asking, "Who are you wearing?" Because she has baby on her, but who are you wearing? Like them.
Can I ask you about the world of cartoonists?
Yeah, please.
And the politics of it. I mean, we can go back to Al Cap. Then I know there's some guy, Dilbert or something, which I never really followed.
God.
Some right-wing guys doing cartoons. Tell us about what you know about the world of cartoons. What's the market for cartoons, etc.
Mostly right-wing guys don't do cartoons. It's very that's not the typical cartoonist profile. That Dilbert guy is an anomaly. That's why we know about him. It's because he's an anomaly. But it's so the New Yorker's been publishing cartoons. They still call them drawings since its inception. In the 1920s, when they started publishing cartoons, the artist would sell the drawings, not the caption. So they'd send those drawings to humorists who would write captions for the cartoons. It wasn't one person doing both of those pieces. So it wasn't until the late 40s that it turned into this, like, you write a joke that is they're called gags. It's a single panel, type of joke writing. It is one of the only, but the New Yorker continues to be one of the only cartoonist paid jobs. It's very hard to be paid to be a cartoonist, and especially in a post-print newspaper era where the comic strip is no longer alive in this way that it was even 10, 20 years ago. 20 years ago was quite alive. It's not anymore. It's just sort of a different landscape. But I teach a comics class at SAIC, and there is a new comics masters at SAIC now, that's really cool. Which suggests that the medium is actually thriving. I just don't know that people are making a lot of money on it, but people are doing it, and it requires a certain level of obsession and joy.
Yeah. So before the show, we talked briefly. I said I knew a couple of New Yorker cartoonists going way back, Carl Rose and Whitney Darrow. But I just remembered that when I was a kid growing up in Connecticut, I went to the YMCA, and on Saturday mornings there was a cartoon class, a guy named John Nagy. And he would, had a big pad up there and draw, and we'd all have our pad and draw. And I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but I'm just wondering is there a lot of camaraderie and interconnection between cartoonists?
Yes. Yes, people. Yeah, I'm looking at these artists. Thanks for introducing me to all three of these guys. I'm not super familiar with this era of cartoonists.
They're way old. Yeah. Older than me.
They're really cool. These are all, I'm looking at them now, all really, really classically trained. But I'm also seeing that the two you told me, Whitney Darrow Jr. and Carl Rose, were both people who did the drawings, but not the writing. They didn't write the jokes. So that's interesting.
So who are your influences and mentors that set you on this path, or have you worked with or admire?
On the cartooning path?
Yep.
Like, okay.
Yes.
Well, let's see. I loved working with Peggy at the Field Museum. So she's a mentor of mine and taught me how to draw. I drew in New Orleans, but she taught me how to draw. I was in my 30s when I learned how to draw, which is just to say, I think it's always an option for people to learn how to draw. And then in terms of cartoonists, I like a lot of the people who are working today. Liana Fink is a fantastic New Yorker cartoonist. You would recognize her work. I think I have one of hers on the desk. It's these sort of like line drawing type pieces. And she reached out to me when I published my first book. She blurbed my first book in 2018. And then we became sort of close. We had our babies at the same time. So she's fantastic. Sophia Warren, going back, Roz Chast is everyone cites her. I think she paved the way for women to do this in a lot of ways. But I'm excited about what people are doing now. And at SAIC, there's a great cartoonist or comics artist named Beth Heartland, who has written a fantastic graphic novella called Tender. It's a body horror, so you don't read it unless you want to be very disturbed. But I think she's fabulous. Chris Ware and Linda Berry are my two favorites. I have them tattooed on me. I was really lucky to take a class from Chris Ware while I was at the Art Institute. He only ever taught one, and Linda came and spoke. And I don't know, I like the whole bookshelf back here. There's just a world full of these amazing artists. We're living in a time with some just brilliant cartoonists.
Yep. So to go back to your book, what would you say is a takeaway for people reading Kin, The Future Family?
I'm hopeful that, I want this book to be a hopeful book. Like, I want it to suggest that to not be quite so doom and gloom about how everything is trash, and to find each other and belong to each other, because life is short, and sort of more of a pivot towards what can we do for the species versus what can we do for the self. And it's like an anti-division. Like I do think you can find commonality when you're face to face with people. It's very easy to lose sight of the humanity of other people when you're online or in a car, which I think one of my fun theories is that the internet and cars are the same thing.
We talked earlier about Rogers Park, and I'd like you to share with us a little information about having chickens. Can you tell us about what it's like to be an agricultural type person in an urban environment?
We have chickens. We have right now 7, maybe 8. I guess I have 7. I think we have 7. And we've taken in a lot of strays. So people have thrown chickens into our yard because they know we have them, and then we are stuck with them. It's happened more than twice. It's been great. I always wanted chickens. I had them in New Orleans, and I wanted bees, and we liked this house because it had a nice big yard. And actually, the person who owned the house before us, Curtis, had a big shed attached to the garage that we just let be the chicken coop. We just transformed that into the chicken coop and threw some chickens in there. And we've learned a lot about chickens. I mean, I could go on about that for an hour, but like to tie it back to the book, I've met so many people through our chickens, just people who want to talk about our chickens. So anytime I'm out in the yard, someone will be like, "Oh, okay, do you want to talk? Can we meet your chickens?" Or, we've met a lot of people that way, and that's just been a gift. I make a little newspaper for them called the Coop News that I distribute. It's been a while since we've had an issue, but it'll come back.
Yeah, you can pick it at the chicken viewing window where people can walk past and ogle the chickens. But you talk again, and Ken, you talk about just saying hello to someone on the street makes a big difference to build a neighborhood.
Yeah, that's the thing to do, to say hello and learn people's names. It's like so easy is the thing that is strange about. I mean, I think it really isn't that hard the fear is like fear of being rejected, and people do get rejected. So you have to be able to know that not everyone wants to engage the way you do, but I think most people do. And I used to go to Prayer Porch every morning, that Easter house. I used to go there every morning at 6 a.m. And I would always, every time I'd walk home from Prayer Porch, I would just decide I was going to cross over the street to say hi to whatever strangers I would see. And maybe because I'm a gorgeous woman, the response was very positive. So I don't know. Say hi to people.
Sophie Lucido Johnson. We're going to run out of time, but I'd love it if you could give us about a minute's worth of encouragement, given the seriousness of issues that you and all of us are facing in the world these days.
Euan wanted me to tell you, or to tell you, and I don't know if this is the time, but I am just going to say it since we're running out of time, Euan, is that when the Heartland closed, we bought the big sandwich board that used to be outside that said Heartland Cafe now open, and so that's like in our front living room area. The Heartland was my favorite place to go. So also all of our chairs are Heartland chairs, and we just our family is a big. My husband's, I think, worked on maybe even your house. I'm not sure. Like, just definitely, we love Heartland. And that's not an answer to your question, but it is sort of in a way, because it's like we're surrounded by people who are loving and amazing and have created beautiful things, and everyone has a fantastic story to tell. So get to know your neighbors.
So, Mike, let me so Sophie, in addition to your books, you have T-shirts and calendars and stickers, and you have the full merch with your unique style. Where can people find out more about your products and your work? SophieLucidoJohnson.com. I'm on Instagram at Sophie Lucido Johnson, and I have a newsletter called You Are Doing a Good Enough Job that you can subscribe to, and I'll tell you that you're doing a good enough job.
Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
You have all those Heartland chairs. I got tables. Maybe we could do something.
You have mugs as well, Mike.
I've often wondered where all that stuff went. I mean, I have some of it. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. I want to thank Sophie Lucido Johnson and James W. Russell, as well as Euan, for helping out today. My son Hal doing the engineering. And we'll be back next week with some interesting guests. Another friend of Euan's will come on, but that's a secret. And I encourage everybody to continue to do the best, do good in the world, because the world certainly needs all the good that we do together. And together we will make a difference. This fascist onslaught will not endure forever, because the world needs cooperation, and we're here to help move it on that path. Over and out till next week.
She can. Over the mountain.
Thank you for watching the Live from the Heartland show.
You got a dream
waiting. Air every Friday beginning at 9 a.m. Central Time.
It may not come
Thursday on Can
but
TV,
you know you've got a friend.
Sweet Home Chicago.
I'll be by your side the entire ride. Just let me hear you say amen.
Are you doing?
Audio episodes go live on WLUW Saturday 9 a.m. on the left end of your dial at 88.7 FM or streaming everywhere worldwide at WLUW.org.
Are you doing the best you can?
They're available on Apple and Spotify podcasts by looking up Live from the Heartland on either platform, and are also broadcast on Lumpen Radio each Friday at 9 a.m. on 105.5 FM and streaming at lumpenradio.com. I'm Michael James, and I'm glad to have been your host. Until next time, remember, do good in the world because the world needs all the good that you do, that I do, that we do together. All power to the people. Over and out.
Come to limb. Are you doing the best you can? Tell me, are you doing